Welcome to this explainer. It's kind of strange when you think about it. Some of the absolutely most intelligent, deeply empathetic, and emotionally aware people you will ever meet are also some of the most exhausted. And I'm not talking about being physically tired from running a marathon. No, they're exhausted from literally just thinking too much. So today, we're going to explore this really fascinating psychological paradox, how a highly intelligent mind can become its own most exhausting hurdle.
I mean, how many times have you found yourself in this exact situation? You're lying awake, it's 2 a.m., and you're just staring at the ceiling. Absolutely nothing has actually gone wrong, but your brain is busy mapping out like a dozen different scenarios of how you might accidentally ruin your entire life by next Tuesday, right? Or maybe you're replaying a totally normal conversation that ended hours ago, meticulously analyzing every single syllable. So why does your brain refuse to stop asking, what if?
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The Overthinker's Paradox. When thoughtfulness becomes a draining habit.
The wild thing about this paradox is that the exact same mental habit making someone so incredibly careful and empathetic is the exact same thing quietly draining their batteries. The traits we absolutely value the most are basically powered by an engine with no off switch. Now, psychologists actually have a clinical name for this invisible struggle: maladaptive rumination. It's basically that tendency for your mind to get stuck on a loop, circling back to the exact same thoughts over and over, especially around things like uncertainty, past events, or, awkward social situations. But here's a really crucial piece of context. Studies out of Yale and the University of Michigan consistently show this isn't happening because people are just weak or naturally overly anxious. Nope. In a lot of cases, it's because their brain has an exceptionally high capacity for pattern recognition. It's literally always scanning, always processing, and always hunting for meaning.
Which brings us to Section 2, the science of rumination, the always online mind.
So what's actually happening under the hood here? Well, the issue isn't how smart you are. It's that your neurological system literally never gets the all-clear signal to shut down. We're looking at two main players in your brain. First, we've got the prefrontal cortex. This is the region running your planning, analysis, and self-reflection. And for overthinkers, this area stays lit up like a Christmas tree even during downtime. Then we have the default mode network. This acts as your brain's background processing system, constantly generating this internal, ongoing monologue. So when you put these two together, you get a brain that is essentially always online. It's like a sports car engine that's constantly running audits, drafting up 5 different responses to a conversation that hasn't even happened yet, and just burning through fuel the entire time.
Let's look at Section 3, a clever survival strategy, the origins of the overactive mind.
What's truly fascinating, and honestly a bit heartbreaking, is that this mental habit doesn't usually just pop out of thin air when we're adults. It actually starts out as a very clever, entirely necessary survival strategy. You see, the roots of an overactive mind are almost always found in unpredictable environments. Think about it. If a kid grows up in a house where moods shifted totally out of the blue, or where making a normal everyday kid mistake resulted in this massive, disproportionate punishment, well, their young brain learns a very logical lesson. It learns that to stay safe, you absolutely have to think ahead. You've got to anticipate everything. Because if you can predict what's coming, maybe, just maybe, you can protect yourself from the fallout.
So I really want to emphasize this critical point. Overthinking is not a flaw. It's an adaptation. What you're experiencing is actually a highly capable, incredibly smart nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do to survive in a world that at one point felt really unpredictable and unsafe. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how our brain actually tricks us. Let's look at Section 4, the dopamine trap, the illusion of mental progress. So why is it so incredibly hard to just flip the switch off once we are actually safe? Well, it's because our brain actively tricks us into believing all this rumination is super productive. Psychologists generally break overthinking into 2 distinct camps, and they feel completely different. First, there's reflective rumination. This is when you turn inward to understand yourself, process your feelings, and make sense of the world. And hey, this is a massive strength. It's deeply tied to high emotional intelligence. But then there's brooding rumination. This is the passive, really distressing pattern where you just dwell on a problem without ever getting any closer to a solution. This is the one that costs you. It steals your sleep, causes decision paralysis, and skyrockets social anxiety. The real trap here is that overthinkers are constantly bouncing between the two. One minute you're having a healthy reflection, and the next you've invisibly slid right into a dark, brooding spiral. And this actually builds into a literal chemical loop. People always say just stop thinking about it. But here's why that is totally neurologically naive. First, you start constructing mental arguments, right? You're analyzing the scenarios. And because it kind of feels like you're making progress, your brain hits step 2. It releases tiny hits of dopamine for engaging in what it assumes is problem solving, which dumps you right into step 3. Your brain is now being chemically rewarded just for the act of thinking, not for finding an answer, just for spinning the wheels. So yeah, your brain literally has a built-in chemical incentive to keep this exhausting loop going forever.
But hey, it's definitely not all doom and gloom here. Let's talk about a really fascinating piece of research from 2013, published in the journal Psychological Science. It actually revealed a pretty amazing silver lining to having this exhausting mental engine.
The study showed that people who reported higher levels of rumination also scored significantly higher on measures of cognitive empathy. So, what does that actually mean for you in the real world? It means you are remarkably perceptive. Overthinkers have this almost superpower-like ability to understand and anticipate exactly how someone else might be thinking or feeling. They pick up on all those tiny social nuances, they know exactly how their words are going to land, and they are deeply, deeply attuned to the unspoken emotional vibe of any room they walk into. The exact same mental engine that makes you so incredibly tired is also the exact same thing that makes you so profoundly perceptive.
So how do we find some peace? Section 5, Taming the Active Mind. Safe enough to rest.
Now, we definitely have to acknowledge the tension here. Having all that perception without any actual resolution, it's just exhausting. You notice literally everything. You feel the weight of every single possibility. But finding clarity feels totally impossible. So taming that active mind has to start with this really quiet, profound truth from modern psychology. The mind cannot think its way out of every problem. Let that sink in for a second. Your brain desperately wants to solve every situation like it's a math equation. But some things in life, they just have to be felt. They have to be decided upon, or sometimes they just have to be released. You literally cannot solve them through sheer mental force.
This is why therapists who work with chronic overthinkers don't even try to force you to stop the thoughts. Because, as we saw with that dopamine loop, that's practically impossible. Instead, they focus on changing your relationship with those thoughts. Enter a concept called cognitive diffusion. This is a practice pulled from acceptance and commitment therapy. And really simply, it's the practice of observing your thoughts without actually fusing with them. It means just noticing the thought loop without letting it drag you directly into the center of the storm.
So how do you actually do this in the moment? Well, a fused thought sounds like, this situation is dangerous and I need to figure it out. That thought practically grabs you by the collar and throws you down the spiral. But a defused thought sounds like, my brain is generating a concern right now. You see the difference? It's a really subtle shift, but an absolutely powerful one. That first thought traps you. The second one, it gives you just a tiny fraction of distance. You're just observing your brain doing the thing it was trained to do, but you don't actually have to obey.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway of this explainer. Overthinking is not a personality defect. It is absolutely not some kind of evidence of emotional instability or weakness or anything like that. At its very core, it is simply a highly active, incredibly intelligent mind that learned to stay alert in a world that once felt really uncertain. Now, understanding these patterns doesn't just magically erase them overnight, but it absolutely changes how much power they hold over you.
The goal isn't to shut off your thinking entirely. The real challenge is to gently, and with a whole lot of patience, teach that brilliant, hypervigilant mind of yours that your environment has finally changed. So, I'm going to leave you with this one question to think about. Your mind learned to overthink to keep you safe, but are you finally safe enough to let it rest? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a fresh new way to understand your own beautiful mind.